So how do we help our struggling writers, the ones that need intervention? There's a 5-part process to this, so let's get going. I'm Robin Millum, a children's book author and a middle school English teacher. I've created my own writing program called the Structured Writers Workshop. It puts the students in charge of the workshop. There are all these different components to it. You'll see in a lot of my videos that I go over exactly how I do that. But today I want to focus just on those that need intervention. You might find that there are some students who just aren't thriving in the current writing program that you're doing. So what can you do? I'm going to go through 5 parts to this. So each video will be its own separate part. So you can go through this in the playlist. And in this one, we're going to talk about reluctant writers. We need to dig into why they're reluctant. Once we can kind of uncover what the problem is, it's going to make the rest of all of this fall into place so much easier. And then we'll move on to all the other components like sentence writing, paragraph writing, scaffolded essays, and so on from there. So I'm going to show you on my screen the resources that I have and some ideas that I have for you on how to handle reluctant writers.
Okay, here we are inside the writing intervention strategy, I guess additional training you would call it. This is going to be a playlist, a series of 5 videos. There will be 5 of them. This is part 1. So here's what we're going to be working with. Part 1 is reluctant writers, as I said. Then we'll move into sentence writing. We're going to talk about grammar, paragraph writing, scaffolding your essays, and then how do you build the skills with these students throughout the whole entire year. So here's where I want to start with our reluctant writers. Okay, suppose you have some students who come to you. They can't write, not very well, and they don't want to write. And so they can't even structure a sentence necessarily. So our first reaction is to do what? And I actually want you to pause this and I want you to write down or tell yourself, if I had some students who couldn't even really structure a sentence very well, what would you do with them at the beginning of the year? And then come back. Okay. So here's what I would do when I was younger. I would think, well, if they can't even write a sentence yet, then we need to get back to the basics. And you may have heard people talk about that. Like if they can't even write a sentence, we've got to get back to sentence writing. They need to know how to diagram a sentence. They need to know what a noun is and a verb is in order to write a sentence. But I am going to press on the idea that perhaps that's not the answer, because we're dealing with humans. We're not dealing with AI quite yet. We're dealing with humans and how their psychology works in their children. And so that's what we have to dig into with reluctant writers. And I want to pause here for a moment about the idea of emotional deposits before you turn to explicit grammar teaching. What I mean by that is usually when a student comes to us and they hate writing, it's because they have had a bad experience in the past. And this might not be intentional on the teachers in the past, but here's what happens naturally as humans. And this is strange, but when we read somebody else's writing, and even I do this still, and I know not to do this, and I still do it. Like when my son shares his writing with me, he's in college. He's a very good writer, and he'll share whatever he's working on. And I'll read it and I'll see these wonderful things in there, but then I will see something that's wrong, or that word is not used correctly, whatever it is. And my immediate reaction is, I need to tell him that. Oh gosh, I got to tell him that this word is wrong. Instead of all 15 things that I thought of that were amazing about his writing, I have to literally like sit on my hands to not point out what's wrong with it. Even after all these years of trying to change this in myself, I have to stop doing that. And that's what I'm asking for everyone else to do. Because when we look at something and we pick out what's wrong first, whatever comes after that is like wah, wah, wah from Charlie Brown. We don't hear it. We just internalize what we did wrong. And for some reason, writing is very connected to our inner self-esteem. I don't know why. I don't know who decided to do that about us, about humans, but that's the way it is. And so we as teachers need to approach students, particularly the reluctant ones, in a totally different way. It's as if you're trying to tame a wild animal. It sounds weird, but I swear you have to kind of come at it from these different angles and maybe try a little reverse psychology and a little bit of this and a little bit of that until you can get the child to trust you. You can't ask a student to do big things unless you have a lot of emotional deposits into your writing deposit jar that you can pull on when you ask them to do the big thing. I want you to do an essay. If you have enough deposits in their emotional jar, they will allow that to happen. That's all part of my program. But let me talk about this. Oftentimes, the kids come to us and they will say things like this first line here. They'll say, it's too hard. It's not fun. It's boring. They'll say, I can't do it. These are things that have been ingrained in their head over years, and we have to find a way to turn that around because it will stop them from being successful in their writing. It's also very subjective. So because it's almost like it's someone's opinion about my writing, even though technically this could be correct or incorrect, whether it's strong or not strong, it's kind of subjective. So when someone makes an evaluation on our writing, that feels really vulnerable. Even for me, when I submit stuff to my agent, I, in fact, not too long ago, submitted something and I am waiting to hear back. And when I hit submit and sent it to her, I was like, this is the best thing I've written. This is amazing. And within about 20 minutes, I was like, oh no, she hates it. It's awful. It's the worst thing I've ever done. I can't, it's an emotional roller coaster with writing. And I apologize, but that's the way it is. So writing is woo-woo, and we need techniques to get us into the mood for writing. Authors do this. They go to groups. They go to coffee shops. They get in their comfy chair. They put on a certain background music. I can't write when there's music that has lyrics in it because the lyrics will pull me out. I can write when it's instrumental. So I tell the kids that too, that it can help like soften some things and get you into a dreamy state so that you can write. And so I think the things that authors do are the things that we need to be doing at this age level so that they have the techniques and the skills already in their toolbox to not have to like deal with all these negative ideas. And so our job is to get past every single one of these objections on the board right now. So how do we turn this ship around with a reluctant writer? I'm going to talk about LeBron James because I always do. So think about how he learned to play basketball really well. It wasn't because he showed up at a gym when he was 7 years old and someone handed him a rule book and said, memorize this, and we're going to take a little test, and now you can play basketball really well. What happens is instead you show up at the gym and on the wall, there's just this rack of basketball after basketball after basketball. One of those is for each player, and they know that. And even though they see the coach in there, they see that basketball, and they just want to go play with it. Even if it's dumb, silly, stupid stuff, they want to start manipulating that basketball, throwing it, bouncing it, doing whatever they can. And they absolutely need that time to get to know the basketball, to get confidence with it, and then the rules are going to make sense. So I offer that we should flip when we teach grammar. We need to get them ravenous about the idea of writing. And then once we have writing from them, we can start to layer in like, okay, we could make this a little better. You want me to show you how? And you'll get much more from them. So in my classroom, I make sure that no one is passively waiting for a worksheet. That is the worst thing you could do is if they came into the classroom and just sat down like this and they're just waiting and their arms are crossed. There's no active learning there. So I turn my workshop all around to where they're incredibly engaged in it. And I tell them that in the workshop time, we're not going to write essays. And there's something about telling them you're going to do workshop and you're not going to write an essay that makes them just like, woohoo. You're going to tinker, you're going to explore, you're going to try new things. And I actually show them a picture of a workshop, like a really chaotic workshop in someone's garage. And before I tell them this on the screen, I say, what is this? What's going on in here? And so they can start to pull out like, oh, why would a person have a workshop? What are they doing in there? And pull out the words already. And then you'll go to this slide and you'll talk about how the writer's workshop is pretty much the same thing. And I'm going to flip through these slides that I show with my students. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it's in the bigger training that I've done. But I did want to show it to you briefly because this is how I get my kids excited about how writing is different in my classroom. We're trying to turn them around from being reluctant into being engaged. And so I talked to them about the idea of tinkering, about, let's see if I can move this, leader's choice, power lessons, diamond mining. And this, again, we'll go through all of this in my training if you'd like to take the bigger one. But I go through this and I get them very excited. And they're like, what? Let me go back up this one, actually. Right here, when I say it's choice, I tell them, this is not just you get to choose the topic of your essay choice. This is like actual choice, you all. Like these are things that you're going to actively decide that you want to do in your writing. It's all back on them. And they love that. These are the different choices they have. And then it's explained here. The lessons that I teach them, they time me for 7 minutes. And they always know where we are in the wheel of what lesson we're learning and which one we're going to go to next. So they're used to these terms. And then diamond mining is a huge part of the program, which is finding those positives. And this is actually really good for the teacher because it forces you to do that thing. Like I told you, I automatically want to tell my son what was wrong. But if I know as a teacher, I have to find a diamond in every workshop, it changes my own behavior. So this is really good for you too, honestly. But then I tell them they're not allowed to start workshop yet. This goes back to the like trying to tame a wild animal. You're trying to come at them from all these different directions using psychology. And if you tell a kid that there's something they really, really want, but you tell them, you're not yet, you can't get it yet. They're like, what? So I tell them they have to prove to me that they are ready to start this. And the only way they can prove it to me is through my first writing lesson, which is on voice. And I have a whole video, I'll link it below, on how I teach this voice lesson. It is highly engaging. There is movement. It's community building. It's an amazing, it's so fun. And I have a Facebook group of teachers and they'll come in and tell me about what happens after they do that first voice lesson. And the transformation that happens within the first week is unreal. So we do that one, but then I make sure that I'm doing these daily writing tasks that focus on sentence construction. And because I've already made some deposits into their writing bank of this is going to be fun, you're going to have choice. We're doing workshops where you're tinkering and not writing essays. They're already like sitting up a little bit. What is this? What's going on? This is exciting. But that's not the only part of my writing program. There's a huge part of it that's a daily sentence construction. Now, before we get to the end here, I wanted to say that if you are ready to just jump into the training that I have, it's a 10 video training. It's actually about 5 hours and it will take you through my entire program. And I have another bundle here that has all of the materials you could possibly need to get a workshop up and off the ground and have all your essays done and planned throughout the whole entire year. If you want to just get started, the first module of the training is free. So that link is below too. And you can go and check out that 30-minute video and get a really good idea of how the workshop is set up. Now, we started with reluctant writers. we're setting up our room so that they realize that this is a different type of English class. This is not a teacher who's going to look at my work and jump on me for all the things I'm doing wrong. This is something that I can relax with. I can be who I am. And there's so much less stress with that. So next, in part 2 of writing intervention, we will talk about what I do on a daily basis to approach writing sentences and grammar. We do it every day, and they absolutely love it. I promise. So make sure you're subscribed so that you get a notification when part 2 of this video goes up. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.